You're in a very similar position to the audience right now, because you don't have to listen to a thing of what I'm about to say. And in fact, why would you? And why would they? Right now, I'm competing for your attention against messages, against emails, and against countless wandering thoughts, all of which grew so strong over the course of the pandemic. Not only that, but I'm also stuck in two-dimensional purgatory here, where I'm public speaking without my public. And that can be terrifying and awkward for both the speaker and the audience, because it's never clear if I'm pausing because I forgot my words, because I'm going for dramatic effect, or merely because I'm trying to invoke a laugh. That's perhaps why, when I was trying to do a research project on effective public speaking techniques, looking at things like how to modulate the voice and what gestures to use, I couldn't find anything. Instead, pages and pages of academic literature are dedicated not to public speaking effectively, but to eliminating public speaking anxiety. Indeed, to quote Jerry Seinfeld, nowadays most studies find that people's number one fear is public speaking, and death is number two. That means that to most people at a funeral, you're better off being the guy in the casket than the one giving the eulogy. Inundated with statistics like this, I decided to investigate what was going on, and what was initially a short and brief project has since become my mission to help people live not just free from the fear of public speaking, but liberated by the love of it. Unfortunately, I've had wonderful opportunities here at Stanford with the Center for Writing and Speaking and with several other programs to refine years of training with which I've been blessed in public speaking, debating and drama, academic research, and of course, hands-on exposure to some of the best students and faculty in the world. And in a humble little talk I've come to call Talk Like Everyone's Watching, I'm excited today to give a very brief overview of that program and where it's heading. So, jumping right into it. When it comes to overcoming the fear of public speaking and the anxiety, the first step is controlling the mind, the second is hacking the body, and the third is exposing yourself to adverse rehearsal circumstances. On to controlling the mind. This consists of everything that you would think you would need to silence the negative thoughts in your mind that tell you that you're about to fail a speech. If you're not a fan of self-help talks, books, or podcasts, now might be the time to sigh, because I'm about to say that there's an importance to rituals, meditation, and prayers. Now, wait. I'm not proselytizing. That would be bad. I was told very explicitly that that was the case. Nor am I going to suggest how you ought to sip water in full lotus on a yoga mat smelling incense, but rather talking to the values of rituals, rituals, prayer, etc. in general. And obviously, they're very effective at stress reduction as general techniques. This has been proven scientifically countless times. But they're particularly good on the day of a speech, once they've been ingrained as routines. Why is that? Because not only will you quiet the negative thoughts, but you can also direct them into a position of creating confidence when you speak. For example, as a religious Jew, I have very set prayers that I'm supposed to say in the morning, which I always do right before meditating for about 30 minutes. Each of those requires such explicit focus and mental control and dedication that by the time my morning routine is over, I've had no time to panic about my speech, and somewhat just have to go in and deliver it, right? And the power of that is that not only am I no longer worried, but I also think to myself, well, I've completed my morning routine as I always do, now I'm about to go and give a speech after I've completed a morning routine, hence everything must be normal. I'll remember it, my body will remember it, and so will my voice, which will lead to exceptional results. In fact, in a stunning paper called Don't Stop Believing, Rituals Increase Performance by Reducing Anxiety, the authors, many of them faculty at profound business schools across America, prove, well, exactly what the title says that they're going to prove. They prove that rituals improve performance by reducing anxiety. Of course, the rituals that they're talking about predominantly consist not just of controlling the mind, but a mixture of mind and body, which brings me to point number 2 of controlling the body, hacking the body rather. If you were to think of actors or public speakers in the most comical form you could, you'd probably picture a range of very weird warm-ups. They'll play with their voices, they'll go low and high and and, sort of project themselves and take up as much space as they can, like superheroes, or be tiny little lemons and large lions. And the thing about all these cliches is that they're 100% true. And there's an important reason for that. In an exceptional book called Acting with Passion, which I cannot recommend enough, the author Nikki Flax goes deep into Reichian psychology to explore why the body is the key to an exceptional performance, because all our emotions are stored therein. She describes that we each have this inner critic within us that tells us why we're doing badly or tries to read our lines long before we've got to them and will trip us up as we start thinking too intellectually without just performing. And this inner critic lies deep within the body and its tensions. Drawing on Reich, she explains that when we're young, we're naturally good performers. We have to be. We need to cry so that we can show that we need to be fed. We need to smile so that we can show that we're happy. We communicate our needs by performing. And that's all very well and good during your infancy. But as you grow up, you're taught that, stamping your feet and shouting for what you want without taking no as an answer is called a tantrum. And so we learn. We start standing more quietly. We're taught to be seen and not heard. And subsequently, the body develops this instinct of suppressing your ability to speak and be seen. And that's why your jaw will lock up. It's why your knees will go tense. It's why you'll get butterflies the minute you stand up on stage, because you have over time taught yourself not to. And that's why actors have to loosen up when they perform and when they warm up, so that they can break that cycle from the body. Flax has an incredible warm-up called self-tuning, which I couldn't do justice to in such a short speech, but she basically speaks on the importance of pelvic thrusts, having wide shoulders, jumping up and down, stamping your feet and saying no, and taking up space because you're bombastic and you deserve to be heard, and it's going to make you a better public speaker in the long term. So what does that have to do with Michael Jordan? Well, on the topic of being bombastic, seen and heard at the same time, Michael Jordan made Chicago Bulls training notoriously difficult. In training, there were no referees, there was no crowd, so he could be as big of a bully as he wanted to be, and he would let his players know when they were letting him and the Chicago Bulls down. Subsequently, a lot of the players said that, an actual game with Michael was so relaxing compared to training with him because it was much lower stakes given that he wasn't going to judge and bully you. And that is exceptionally effective when extrapolated to the field of speaking. Too often, we create this rehearsal environment of a noise-free studio. We tell everyone we know that we're practicing for a speech, please don't get involved. And then, if something adverse should happen during the speech, if there's noises or distracting sights, we didn't train for that and we're not sure how to handle it. And this, no matter how prepared you were, can throw a lot of performers. And to overcome that, why not train for the worst? It's so uncomfortable to talk watching yourself in a mirror, and yet it's one of the most commonly recommended techniques because you're scrutinizing every move. When you're speaking for a coach or a director, and whatever it might be, you're giving your heart and soul out to someone who's sitting with a stopwatch and a timer, telling you when you need to pause, writing down every mistake you're making. It gets to a point where when you give your actual speech, you're going to think, phew, finally, I'm free, because in general, it would be pretty poor etiquette of your audience members to make the same levels of noise as the parking lot in which you practiced your words and your speech, ultimately ingraining a routine such that you're ready for anything. Combining these 3 steps over time should already eliminate your fear of public speaking. But is that really what you want? It's one thing to have a speech as this big thing in mind, as though it's a marathon, and once you're through, and you did all these techniques and now you're relaxed and it's fantastic and you can take a break. But it's another to finish a speech and think, I want more. To put up your hand and say, do we need someone to talk about this? I'm the one that wants to do it. To itch for audience members, because your employers or whoever you know will look for people like that. They're the ones that stand out. So how do we start loving public speaking and the art form that it is? 3 steps once more. The first, again, the self-help thing, you can let out your sighs now because you've probably heard this millions of times by now, especially if you've watched other talks, is embracing a relationship with failure. I know, it sounds pretty cliched and you learn from your mistakes, chin up, that sort of thing that people always say, but it's particularly useful in the context of performing and speaking. And the example that I think works best is with theatre. While you might have a big academic pitch that you're supposed to give or present research, and it goes terribly, terribly wrong, all you can do is dwell on that once it's happened. Whereas with theatre, you suddenly have a huge difference because you're required to perform within the space of hours or maybe days apart, and you have to do it all again and again and make it look fresh. You'll learn over time. There's a big difference between how people watch your show on a Saturday night and how they watch it on a Sunday morning. And sometimes you're just going to bomb and you're not sure why. And the best thing to do is to talk to your castmates and to laugh about it. And then I guarantee the next show and the next time you go on that stage, you're going to think, this could not possibly be as bad as the last show was. And that's great, because then it's low stakes and it's going to go much better than you could ever think that it will, right? Ray Dalio puts this well in his book Principles. He has this beautiful graph which shows a trajectory of having an audacious goal. Suddenly you fail and you go all the way back around, you learn new principles, you achieve it, and then you have more audacious goals, and that little cycle proceeds. Think of it this way. You have a speech you have to give in front of 400 people. It goes terribly. That's fine. You know one day you might have to do that again. And so you start performing to crowds of 50, and you think, this can't go badly. I performed in front of 400. Sure, it was bad, but that's the benchmark for stressful. And suddenly, the day you're going to have to perform for 400 again, you're going to be a natural. Because every time you get up and speak, you think to yourself, I've been here before. If I fail, it's just another opportunity to learn. If I succeed, it just means I'll have bigger audiences. Because the bigger the stages on which you'll fail, the bigger the stages on which you'll succeed. Which is great, because it means that you're going to make fewer mistakes, perhaps. But mistakes will still exist. Which brings us to step 2, which is embracing an improvisational mindset. I used to think that improv was just this niche thing that some actors did, and it's quite fun for an hour to go and watch, and you give them suggestions, and fantastic. But what I learned here, Stanford has an exceptional improv program, and a lot of improv is actually born in the Bay Area, was that improvisation is a lifestyle essential not for actors or speakers, but anyone who needs to perform under pressure and needs to perform on the spot. Patricia Ryan Madsen has an exceptional book called Improv Wisdom, in which she explains the importance of just speaking spontaneously. When you're front-loading, which is storing thoughts that don't matter right now, you're going to trip up. If right now I was thinking of the next paragraph I'm supposed to say, I'm going to completely forget that I was talking to you about improv, and then it gets stressful, and then, lines get messed up. And she uses a brilliant example, which is, if you were ever in a language class, even English when you were young, you sometimes had to line up, and each student would read a passage from a book out loud. And by the time it got to your paragraph, you had no idea what was happening. And the reason for that is you didn't listen to the rest of the passage. You counted how many people were ahead of you, counted your paragraph to make sure you could rehearse it again and again and again, and it just sounded clunky, right? But when you embrace an improvisational mindset, you're just speaking on the fly. You might say terribly embarrassing things, but over time, as you get used to it, you'll learn to incorporate those things into your speeches more, and suddenly there'll be all these surprisingly beautiful moments that you never planned, right? Madsen actually references the philosophy of art, where the artist isn't someone who creates something, but is the vector by which art comes alive. One can think of Michelangelo and David. He said he didn't sculpt David. He was in the marble and just had to be taken out. Of course, whatever sculpture you create ought to look a lot like you. And that's a nice transition into step 3, the final step, which is embracing your shtick. TED has gifted us with fantastic talks. So have politicians over the years. They've taught us wonderful techniques. And as you grow in your public speaking journey, you're going to want to be a lot like them. And that's perfectly fine. But the people who are successful in talking at TED aren't talking like TED. They're talking like themselves. And so don't be a cookie-cutter orator. Rather embrace who you are, your slang, whatever it is that you do that can show your true personality when you get up. And when it comes to combining your public speaking self and your regular self, they should be one and the same. And the way I suggest doing this, by the way, is not to get up and speak as though it's a conversation of friends. But when you're with your friends, or when you're alone and narrating your life, perform that the way you would perform a speech. Because your life is one big speech. It's a fantastic story that deserves to be told. And I hope that by embracing these techniques that I've discussed, and as this program develops over time, people will have that power to tell their stories. As you do it, you're going to itch for every audience member you can get. You're going to want to fill out crowds, and you're going to want people to listen to every word you have to say. And that will be the beautiful moment where you want to talk like everyone's watching.